All right, good morning, students. We're going to be starting our review here with what we started the year with, basically, which is our biomolecules, also known as biological molecules. If you recall from way back in even 7th grade, maybe a little bit of 8th grade, when we looked at organic compounds or organic molecules, you probably reviewed something known as schnapps or chomps, which included four elements that are used for biological molecules like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. When we're looking at these specific biomolecules that we find in organic compounds or organisms, they are going to fall into four categories. Four categories being carbohydrates, our lipids, proteins, and our nucleic acids. If you recall, at the beginning of the year, we started mainly with sticking with our first three, our carbohydrates, our lipids, and our proteins. And then we covered nucleic acids when we got more into DNA and RNA. However, for the purpose of this review, we're going to look at all four of them now here in a pretty simple way. First off, we need to identify the monomers. Okay, so the monomer is the single molecule, the little building blocks, if you will, that help to create larger molecules. For our carbohydrate, you're going to notice that our monomer is the monosaccharide. Mono meaning one, saccharide meaning sugar, so one simple sugar. So the building block or the monomer for carbohydrates are simple sugars. One characteristic of carbohydrates that may help you identify them, let's say for testing purposes, if you have diagrams to choose from, is that carbohydrates, for the most part, only have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen present within their molecule. When you look at a carbohydrate and you compare it to a lipid, you'll notice also that the structure of it, the actual format of the diagram is pretty unique as well. Carbohydrates are typically going to be either hexagon or pentagon in shape. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, six-sided, so a hexagon shape for a carbohydrate here. Now, as far as the uses or the function of carbohydrates, these are going to be for the day-to-day short-term energy that we use for all of our basic functions. No storage of energy here. Take in simple sugars and we use them immediately for energy, okay? Transitioning that over to our lipids, what you'll notice with our lipids is that one, structurally, they're very unique. They're very different from our carbohydrates. In fact, they're very E shape, if you will. Sometimes you'll see a bent E in there as well. But for the most part, you're gonna start off with a glycerol and then 3 fatty acids attached to it. As far as the monomers for lipids, technically they don't have a true monomer. However, most people will identify fatty acids as the monomer for lipids. Obviously they take up the most amount of space in the diagram as well, so they're a little bit easier to identify. Now, for our lipids, you're going to notice that there's a similarity between the elements present in the molecule and the elements present in our carbohydrate. Lipids also only include carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Lots more bonds in here as well. A much bigger molecule than what we have here with our simple sugar. Now, lipids, very similar to carbohydrates, are going to provide your body with energy. However, this is more of a long-term energy. This would be our short-term energy. This is more of our long-term energy or energy storage. But lipids also serve another function as the primary component that makes up cell membranes. And we've already reviewed cells. So this is how we're going to make those cell membranes that are semi-permeable. And it's because they're made of lipids, phospholipid bilayer, if you recall, that allows them to function the way that they do. All right. So moving on from our lipids, we then move into our proteins. Our proteins are a little bit more complex in terms of the elements and the arrangement of the molecule. We have 3 sections, if you will, to our proteins. The monomer, the building block of proteins, is going to be our amino acid. And what you will notice with our protein molecule is that it's broken up into these 3 groups: the amino group, the carboxyl group, and then what we call the R group. This will vary based on the protein, and so we've just given it that identification as R group. This will be a separate molecule attached to the entire molecule, obviously. The elements present, you'll notice carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are present here as well, but what separates carbs, lipids from our proteins is that proteins introduce nitrogen, right? This is the first time we've seen nitrogen in our molecules for biomolecules, obviously. Now, as far as the functions of protein, obviously these are going to be building blocks for a lot of different things within your body, more specifically enzymes. Proteins are going to help build enzymes. They're also going to help with a lot of the structural components of your body. Muscle tissue is typically associated with protein. That's what most people recognize it as. But also aiding in immune system function, helping to produce hormones as well. So they serve a lot of functions. And we've talked more about protein synthesis when we got into transcription and translation. We understand the importance of proteins. All right. So moving on from our protein and moving into our nucleic acid, the one that we kind of left off when we first covered the content. Nucleic acid's much more complex than what we've already seen so far with our other three biomolecules. You'll notice three very distinct molecules that are attached to each other. You have what's known as a phosphate group, which, by the way, this is the first time phosphorus has made an appearance in each of our biomolecules. Then you have a simple sugar, and you'll notice how similar this resembles our carbohydrate, which once again, the monosaccharide is a simple sugar. And then you have a nitrogenous or nitrogenous base, and obviously named for all of the nitrogen present within it. So these three distinct molecules combine to create what we call a nucleic acid. The building block, the monomer for nucleic acids, is the nucleotide. And as far as the function of nucleic acids, this is where we're going to start looking at DNA and RNA. So if you think back to the role that DNA and RNA have within your body and within any organism, right? This is going to help with protein synthesis, but also to store all of the genetic information that helps to do everything that you need to do regarding protein synthesis. Obviously, this is something we covered and we'll cover more in depth with transcription and translation. So, quick recap, 4 biomolecules or 4 biological molecules. We have our carbohydrates, we have our lipids, our proteins, and our nucleic acids. The elements present in all of them, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins introduce nitrogen. Our nucleic acids introduce our phosphates. And as far as their functions, carbohydrates are short-term energy, lipids are long-term energy and cell membrane. Proteins are going to help with building structures within your body, but also with the production of enzymes and hormones. These aid in your immune system as well. And then lastly, our nucleic acids, which we associate with our DNA and our RNA. And their main function obviously is going to be to store genetic information that aids in protein synthesis. So hopefully that quick recap will help you with the content we'll be covering later for our EOC. But aside from that, stay tuned for week 2, which is photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Thank you.